Signal detection theory basically explains how our senses work and how we make mistakes in what we sense. Any information which comes to you can be in terms of signals and noises. And signal refers to the important aspects of the information and noise refers to the unimportant aspect of information. And I tried to explain signal detection theory through how doctors read or a radiologist actually read an X-ray report. They need to find the important information, which is the signal, and ignore the unimportant information, which is the noise. Today, we will look at how signal detection theory actually works and look at some parameters of the signal detection theory. Different doctors have different criteria when determining if a bone is fractured. This means that they use different information or have different characteristics and parameters to come to their conclusion about the presence of a fracture. Now, in the case of determining if a bone is fractured, some doctors may have a liberal approach and only consider a few parameters in the X-ray to make their diagnosis, while others may have a more conservative approach and conduct different type of tests before coming to a conclusion. The benefit of the liberal approach is that it can quickly identify a potential fracture and save the patient from further harm by applying a bandage or other treatment. However, the downside is that the patient may receive treatment even if they don't have a fracture. On the other hand, the conservative approach may require more tests and a greater financial investment, but it can avoid unnecessary treatments and expenses if a fracture is not present. Now, sometimes what happens is the parameters that doctors use to determine if a bone is broken can be affected by noise in the X-ray sheet itself. This means that there may be dots or other distortions on the X-ray that can make it difficult to tell if there is really a problem. Signal detection theory is a way to understand how doctors or anyone else can identify important information in their environment and separate it from the noise or unimportant details. So let us first quickly understand the definitions of what signal detection theory is, and I will later on explain you what this theory is all about. Signal detection theory is a way to understand how our brain perceives and detects signals in the presence of noise. So signal detection theory has two functions or two parameters. One is called the hit and the other one is called the false alarm. So what is this hit and what is this false alarm? Hits refers to situations where a signal is correctly detected. So when you are able to detect the signal correctly from no signal situation is called the hit. And the false alarm is when a signal is falsely detected where it is only noise. So false alarm happen when we think we detected a signal but it was just noise. This theory helps us understand how reliable our senses are and how we make decisions based on sensory information. So when a doctor looks at X-ray and able to detect the fracture in the bone, this is called the hit. A hit in signal detection theory refers to correctly detecting a signal, such as bone fracture on an X-ray. But then, if he has falsely saying that there is no bone fracture, that is called false alarm. A false alarm occurs when there is no actual signal, but the doctor mistakenly thinks there is, such as incorrectly stating that there is no bone fracture when there actually is fracture. So when a doctor looks at an X-ray to find a bone fracture, the noise in the background can make it harder to find the fracture. In signal detection theory, a hit is when the doctor correctly finds the fracture, while a false alarm is when the doctor thinks there is a fracture but there is not one. A liberal doctor tends to rely on just one or two characteristics to determine if a bone is broken or not. But sometimes what happens is that the X-ray picture has some marks or scratches on it, which can make it harder to tell if the bone is really broken or not. Then in this case, if the doctor is too lenient and says that there is a fracture even when there is no fracture, he may detect more fractures, but it also increases the number of false alarms. So while it may seem like a good thing to detect more fractures quickly, but it can also lead to more wrong diagnosis. Now, in terms of conservative doctor, what will happen is he conduct multiple tests and analyze multiple parameters to determine if there is a fracture or not by using this method. And so for doing this, the chances of false alarm are reduced in the case of conservative doctor. The more time and parameters the doctor uses, the less likely they are to make an error in diagnosis.